People come to DC a lot of times for really big dreams.
I don't have like inherently better skills or, vision, game IQ than anybody. It's just, time, energy, and effort.
Knocked away! Kittredge, what a catch by D.Y. Chen, and into the end zone for the goal. It is a beautiful Sunday afternoon in our nation's capital, and it is our privilege to welcome you to the AUDL Game of the Week as the DC Breeze open their season by hosting the Toronto Rush. Hi, everybody. Great to be back with you. I'm Evan Lepler alongside Brian Jones. It's week 2 of the American Ultimate Disc League season, but it's opening weekend for us. It's also opening weekend for both of these teams. DC starts their season today, and yesterday, the Toronto Rush got a huge road win up in New York.
Well, the story going into yesterday was that there was all of this new talent on New York, and New York could get over the hump, dethrone Toronto this year in the Eastern Conference, but it was the same old Toronto. They pulled away with a 5-0 run to win the game. This
Toronto franchise has gone 55-4 in regular season play over the last 4 years, and yet today they might be the underdogs. They're playing on the second day of a back-to-back against a DC team that may have lost some big names, but still has a ton of talent, Brian.
Yeah, and at the top of that list is Alan Kolick. He's a lefty. He's one of the most dangerous throwers in the game, and there's something else about him. It's his determination, his ability to keep going. He's got great endurance, and he's going to keep coming and never falter throughout this game.
The DC Breeze went 10-4 a season ago. They finished in second place in the regular season. They went up to Toronto for the East Division title game and lost in overtime. These two teams went the distance to overtime on multiple occasions last year, and certainly there's a lot of question marks when you begin a season, but one thing we're pretty certain of, this will be a competitive and spirited game today.
Yeah, these are the top two teams in the division until New York proves otherwise. We expect a great matchup, big plays back and forth. Great way to start the season, Evan.
Yesterday, Toronto closed on a 5-0 run. They were actually down at the half against the New York Empire, but it's 17 all in the fourth, 5 straight points to close it out. Jonathan Martin, who was injured for much of last year, he was really great. And then the Rush relied on some of their rookies, Connor Armstrong, Mike McKenzie, a couple names you may not be familiar with, but young studs that this team is really excited about.
Coming into the second game of a doubleheader weekend, it's a little bit warmer here. Toronto hasn't been outside. They're going to have to rely on those young playmakers. One of them we're to see on the field today is Breton Tan, number 87. He's an athletic specimen out there, does a great job on the defensive side, but he's going to have to be more aggressive in offense to get the job done.
The commissioner of the AUDL is in the house, Steve Gordon. The commish, it feels like a big game when he's in the village and he's about to launch the ceremonial opening pull from midfield as we get going. The 2017 AUDL season well underway. Yesterday there was a massive upset in the West Division. We'll talk about that as the afternoon progresses. This Toronto team, 10-2 a season ago. They've won the East Division 4 years in a row, and they certainly expect to be there again. Commissioner Gordon didn't put all his muscle behind it, but the southpaw. You know the commish was a southpaw?
Didn't know that. Big advantage here in the game of Ultimate. Great in the wind to have some southpaws. They changed the game.
Each team has a couple of them. Breton Tan, you mentioned, a lanky lefty, and speaking of lanky lefties, Alan Kolick. I'm not sure he should be allowed to wear number 99 because you think of a big guy when you see number 99, and Kolick is a slithery southpaw handler.
He's pretty slender, but he gets the job done. He's kind of fearless when it goes up for discs. He's got the ability to make the amazing layout. We saw it last year against the Empire, putting that game away in the playoffs. Made a gigantic horizontal layout grab for the score.
Toronto Rush will launch the opening pull. Jarrett Marin, who had a really fine game yesterday, will do the honors for the Toronto Rush. Another lefty who is really the quarterback of Toronto's defensive effort. Not nearly as windy here in the district as it was in the Empire State yesterday. And for the Breeze, the season is underway, and the pull just soared out of bounds. And Jonathan Neely will center it for the Breeze, who are under new leadership this year, Brian. Alex Gesquier, he's still involved. The coach of Team USA is the Breeze's technical manager, but a consultant's role. Darryl Stanley, who coached in Philadelphia for several years, is the leader on the sidelines. Will Smolinski is his assistant. Here's Jeff Wodach with his first touch, finding Alan Kolick. This is Markham Schaffner. The Breeze in search of an opening possession of clean ultimate to begin their season. It hangs in the air. What a catch made by Tyler Monroe. They're really excited about what he's capable of, and we know what Alan Kolick can do. A first point full of highlights for the DC Breeze.
That's a bit of no, yes for if you're a coach of the team, because you want your first offensive possession to go smoother than that. Schaffner starts it off with a behind him catch, and then from there Monroe with the big one, and Kolick to cement it for the 1-0 lead. DC does a really good job to start out utilizing the space. They came out in a classic side stack look. And after that, they're looking to get Kolick moving downfield. Kolick usually behind the disc. He's got the speed to stretch the defense and create the opportunities for other cutters underneath.
A couple of great catches here. Monroe misread it slightly. This guy just turned 22 in March. Product of George Washington University, where he's still in school. And now the Toronto offensive line, led by Thompson McKnight, the veteran handler. Andrew Carroll has played a lot of defense in the past, but he's become too good for defense. They need his offensive firepower.
His speed is really in the elite tier of this game. He's absolutely incredible, hard to guard, and can just beat anybody that gives him an inch.
First touch for Connor Armstrong, the youngster who had a really fine game yesterday. Steve Armitage resets it back to McKnight. Toronto Rush in the red zone, employing that straight stack, and this is a 50-50, and it's knocked away by the Breeze defense.
That's a tough one. Ran out of options. At least he tried to give his players a chance looking for Isaac Mazzucchelli in the back of the end zone. But with this win, DC was able to make the play.
Rowan McDonald lets it fly. A lot of airtime, and in fact, too much. Cam Harris knocks it away out of bounds for Toronto. So a couple turns on this second point. 2 minutes in, opening quarter. East Division action and underneath. How about Brian Marshall? He was 4th on the team in D's last year, and McDonald with his second turnover of the point.
A lot of times, some teams try to isolate one player in the end zone like that on a fast break, but DC player came through and knocked down the pass inadvertently.
Looking for Jeffrey Wu, and Harris's flick sails too far. The wind has really picked up just in the past 10-15 minutes. During warm-ups, Brian, there was not much breeze at all, which I think both teams were excited about.
After yesterday, Toronto played in a very windy game, and they started to employ some double-team action. There's going to be a timeout in the field.
Darryl Stanley, the new coach of the Breeze, made the call from the sidelines. Now, Stanley has had an interesting career. He's obviously replacing one of the legendary leaders in Ultimate, which is something that when you talk to him, I mean, he realizes the gravity of it. But at the same time, he knows he has a job to do. And in part because Alex Gesquier has been so supportive and helpful, the players, it seems, have really bought in. Now, it always seems like that in the preseason. As Mike Tyson, the great philosopher, once said, you always have a plan until you get punched in the face. So far, the Breeze haven't been hit too hard, but you know they will before the day is over.
Talking to Stanley before the game, I thought it was remarkable that he started to put some specific processes in to talk about team building. And one of the things they talked about was mindfulness, and also this idea of being able to accept constructive criticism and understanding where it was coming from. And that's going to be crucial for any team that's looking to grow, looking to get better, is to be intentional about it. Some teams, they don't do that. Some teams, they just have a good culture, or they have whatever culture has grown organically. Stanley's trying to be very intentional about how he grows this team.
He's got leaders that are on board with that. Alan Kolick, Matt Kerrigan, Jonathan Neely. From their own end zone. This is Kolick. Remember, in the AUDL, you can substitute on a timeout, which makes a timeout really valuable. Kind of like advancing the ball at the end of a game in the NBA. You can only do it in the final minutes, but you want to save your timeout so you can do it. The fans were expecting a Markham Schaffner bomb. It's coming, don't worry.
That's what he's known for, and he can deliver them really well.
This is Max Castle. Nice left-handed snag by Wodach. Wodach had such a great season last year, Brian, as a downfield striker for this DC club.
He became a player that you knew it was coming. It was almost like Rivera with the cutter. You couldn't do too much to stop it, though.
That's a difficult throw. Wodach in pursuit. And he's in! What a sliding snag by Jeff Wodach for the DC score. A long point, but it's a break, and it's 2-0.
And that's a backbreaker early on. It can really set the tone. I like the use of the timeout early. A couple of errant throws by DC. They get it back in their own end zone, and after that, it wasn't the prettiest offense. You want to be able to score quickly, but they worked it downfield. It took about 20 passes. Toronto was in good position, and finally Wodach broke free for the easy score.
His first goal of 2017 after he led the club a season ago with 42 goals.
I said easy goal, but really uncontested. This is a type of catch that Wodach is known to make. He can make it, do it really well in the air, has the ability to slide and grab the low one.
So the rush offense back on the field.
This is the pretty classic look that we've seen from Toronto over the years, the split stack.
And a well-timed poach.
Great read.
Interception from Marcus Thaw, the former Pittsburgh Thunderbird, now here in Washington, D.C. David Cranston, gold medalist, Team USA Beach Worlds a couple years ago. Marshall to Johnson. Del Rico Johnson with his first score as a member of the DC Breeze. And it's 3-0, the home team in front early.
It looked like for a little bit that DC didn't know what to do. They get the easy block, they have a chance to go on a fast break, and then all of a sudden things slowed down, and once they were able to dump swing it around the field, they made the right decision, put it to Johnson in space. Looked like it might hang a little high, but that's no problem for Del Rico Johnson, known for the highlight reels.
Yeah, it's his first AUDL season, but he has been a stalwart in the sport of ultimate for a long time. He was the first player that the team's owner, Don Grage, signed, locked in, that wasn't on the team last year. So he brought back the guys he wanted to bring back, and then he looked outside last year's roster and said, this is a guy we have to have. And the 27-year-old downfield defender, very explosive.
He's going to be a great addition for this team. Works well in space.
Adrian Yearwood, marked by David Bloodgame. Jonathan Martin on the under with Johnson defending.
I think DC is trying to play intentionally soft on defense. So they're staying back and letting Toronto get the first easy pass, but then clamp down after that.
Yearwood over to Jeff Lindquist. Looking over the top to McKenzie. And it's the younger brother, Mike McKenzie, who has the first score of the game for the Rush.
Great vision. Lindquist is known for being a thrower that can kind of find anybody. Usually it's by the scuba or it's by the high release backhand. Here, able to put it over the top. And wide open in the back of the end zone was McKenzie.
So that point, Brian, took 29 seconds. Fastest point of the game so far. And it wasn't the primary Toronto O-line that was so efficient. It was a lot of their D-line players who got it done.
Once you get broken a couple times in the AUDL, just points go so fast. It's a big field. You're going to expend a lot of energy. You have to trust your defensive line in these moments to get the job done. And good thing for Toronto, they were able to stop the bleeding.
Alan Kolick in the backfield this time. A big bluff. High throw won't be complete. Intended for Schaffner. Jarrett Marin over to Breton Tan, who had such a huge game. It was really his AUDL coming out party on this field a year ago. And a bobble, but a catch for J.J. Edwards. Beg your pardon, that's Mario Zlatic in the end zone for the Rush. Their first break.
That's hugely important for Toronto to come back after being down 3-0. Able to get 2 quick scores, and right off of the set play, in this wind, it's a throw that we expect Kolick to make. It hangs up there a little bit, and Schaffner just mistimes the jump. After that, it's pretty simple offense. Sometimes on these fast breaks, the reason why you want to move the disc quickly is that the defense can never get back into position, and Toronto just has so much space to work with.
Edwards picks up the assist to Zlatic, who's a Rush rookie. He tried out for the team last year, and Coach Scott Hasty said was really impressive, but they just didn't have room for him. A lot of guys might be discouraged by that, not work as hard for the next year. That was not the approach of Mario Zlatic, who's played a lot of mixed ultimate in his past. And he worked really hard, was too good to not make the team in tryouts this year. Castle shooting it, hanging in the air. Who got it? They're going to call it a score for Johnson.
I don't know about that one. Regardless, this was not a smart decision into the wind. Too much time.
So a tie goes to the offense. It's really hard to tell from that review who secured possession first.
I'm pretty sure McKenzie got the first touch on that disc, but whether or not he secured it is another question. Certainly a close one, and a bad break for Toronto. You got exactly what you wanted. We know that Johnson can make that play, but you don't want to hang it so much that you allow other defenders to come into the area.
Both teams have made some shaky throws early on. Do you think that's opening weekend? Do you think that's the fact that it wasn't really that windy in warm-ups, but it became windy once the game started?
Definitely a little bit of both. I think you're seeing from Toronto, they have the advantage of having this chemistry from years of running the same system. For DC, it's been different players in and out, relying in different major roles. So for them, you're going to see some early season jitters. But also the wind's going to cause some things to hang.
McDonald chasing around Isaiah Masek-Kelly. Back to McKnight.
Oh, great move to get it on the force side.
Connor Armstrong finds Masek-Kelly in the center of the field. Carroll's throw takes off on him, though, and it's intercepted by Cantone.
Great read of the play. Knew where it was going before Armitage could get there.
A whistle And there was a pick downfield, so that's going to back up Jonathan Neely deep in his own end zone. Neely just turned 30 in January, one of the leaders of DC Ultimate for several years now. Breaks the mark.
You got to start at the University of Virginia.
Before that, he got his start in Seattle, Washington. Neely winds up, looking to the end zone, got it. Ryan Swift with a layout grab for the Breeze.
Is there a better name for a cutter in Ultimate than Ryan Swift?
I don't think there is. And he lives up to the moniker. Just 22 years old, graduated from the University of Maryland last year, and Darryl Stanley said he was a great out-of-nowhere guy. Showed up to tryouts, very few knew who he was, and he did plenty to make the team.
And this is what you like as a coach, because even though Swift has to go to the ground to make the catch, he's got multiple steps. Neely's got a clear view. There's great timing. It's the back of the end zone. That's what efficient offense looks like. DC able to work it out at the back of the end zone, get a great opportunity to go up 5-2.
You know, Brian, in the offseason, so much of the conversation related to the Breeze was about the players that were not returning. A guy like Tom Doy, who's now playing out west with the Los Angeles Aviators. Guys like Goose Helton and Brent Matsuka, who are now playing with the Raleigh Flyers. Both the Aviators and Flyers, incidentally, playing really big games this afternoon that we'll keep you updated on. But I'm not sure there's been much talk about the new players like Ryan Swift that DC added.
Well, that's just more motivation for them to prove that they can play on this stage, and we just saw Swift, and we'll see about the other additions here, especially with a guy like Delrico Johnson.
Johnson's guarding Brett Tan. Little give and go with Lindquist.
Tan's just so hard to guard. He's going to be a monster when he figures it out, and one of the reasons for that, he's so agile and he's got so much length.
He's shown moments where it has looked like he's figured it out already. What are you hoping to see from Tan? What's the next level?
I think he's just got to be more aggressive. A lot of times, younger players tend to defer to the older ones about where to cut on the offense and when to go. And even though there's talk about it, sometimes teams, you just need to be hyper aggressive.
Ho-ho! Looking to the end zone and denied. Marcus Thaw with his second D of the quarter.
Trying to put it into a window that's just a little bit too tight. There's no reason for that. You have it on the goal line. It wasn't the easiest look.
Tough catch by Johnson, tumbling over.
DC keeping it alive. Just a lot of cutters stagnant downfield, not knowing when to cut.
A stall was called. That's 7 seconds with the disc.
And that's the cause of, that's what we were seeing as the early season jitters. The teams quite haven't figured it out yet, haven't had too many reps.
And Toronto quickly punches it in, the veteran connection of Lindquist and Yearwood.
That is Lindquist's signature throw. We saw it last year win Toronto a game.
Right here.
It's so tough to stop. You know it's coming. I've coached against it many times, and there's a scuba call that comes up late in the stall count. Here, this is an early one.
Here's the D by Thaw, who was making those types of plays for Penn State in the college ranks and in the pro level for the Pittsburgh Thunderbirds a season ago. But the stall called against DC. You know, every year, Brian, early in the season, it takes players a while to get reacclimated to that silent stall count, because that's different at the pro level than in every other level of Ultimate.
It's so tough too. You can plan for it, you can talk about it as a coach, and until you get out there and your internal clock hasn't adjusted yet, until that penalty comes through and you really feel the pain, you just don't get used to it.
It's kind of a rite of passage, actually, for great players in their first AUDL games. I remember Kurt Gibson getting stalled. Remember Bo Kittredge getting stalled. Thompson McKnight had it happen to him several times early on. DC looking to the end zone, floating, hanging for the score. Tyler Monroe runs it down.
Lloyd Blake, a new addition to the team. That's a great throw to space to the end zone. It's a tough throw to make, but once it goes up, it's going to be an easy goal.
DC has been talking about this young man, Tyler Monroe, like he could be a monster. And his preseason performance earned him a spot on the offensive line. Don't be surprised if he has the type of season this year that Jeff Wodach had last year.
And especially as you come into a game and you're going to be the opposing team as a defense, you're going to game plan for Wodach. It's going to give Monroe more opportunities as an offsides is called on DC.
So Toronto will initiate from midfield. When you were a coach and your team went offsides, what would you say to the guys?
You know, it's one of those times I'm shaking my head right now just thinking about it. It's so frustrating because those type of mental mistakes, they're controllable.
Oh, Cantone bids for the D. What a find he has been for this franchise.
Really hard block to get, and I'm not sure he actually got it, but he was close enough to affect the play.
And the defensive pressure lingers. Lindquist secures the disc after Carroll laid out to tip it. McKnight, unmarked. Nice floating backhand to the brink of the end zone. McKnight into traffic to Massac Kelly. And yep, that's going to be a pick. You can see the collision there as it occurred. Closing in on a minute to go in the opening quarter. And into the end zone, it's Martin narrowly eluding the layout of Austin Bartenstein.
The defense here for DC, the Breeze, is really tuned into exactly what Toronto wants to do. And they've been able to build this lead so far that's now 6-4. They've gotten some blocks on tight windows that Toronto's used to hitting. Toronto needs to adjust and just be a little bit more patient. Doesn't have to take the first throw. But regardless, it's going to work for them there. That inside break just creates so much space. It's why Toronto is so good, because they take the defense and kind of turn it on its head. Once they're able to break the mark like that, there's so much space for cutters to work into.
Well, one thing that Scott Hasty, the head coach of the Rush, and his associate head coach, Sachin Raina, were concerned about was getting the legs loose early on the second day of a back-to-back. You don't want to wait 12 minutes to get loose and find your rhythm. What have you seen from Toronto from a leg standpoint these first 11 minutes?
I think DC is getting a lot of opportunities to cut in open space, and that's allowed them to have some easy goals. They've been able to work it out of some really bad positions.
Kolick versus Martin. Neither will have a chance to retrieve Wodach's toss.
Not a good look there from Wodach. Kolick's got the speed if you can put it out in front, but Martin was right there and is a little bit taller. If that's right at the money, Martin's going to have a chance to get a big block.
This is kind of similar to how the first quarter went yesterday, as McKenzie had nowhere to go and he stalled out on the goal line. Toronto was shaky early on yesterday. The Empire came out on fire, generated a lot of pressure. Jeff Babbitt had a couple of good layouts for New York. But Toronto's a team that I think you know as well as anybody from coaching against them. They play the long game. They are unemotional about making plays down the stretch and moving on from early mistakes as Wodach catches the goal to make it 7-4.
After the stall out, that gives the Breeze a big advantage. But you're right about Toronto. Even though DC has a good advantage going into the rest of this game, Toronto's just got too much talent, and they have the experience and the chemistry. They've been playing together for 5 to 10 years almost, some of these guys, and so it's just really easy to design an offense, make some adjustments, guys are on the same page, and every year they're adding a little bit more young talent, and this will start to see kind of an interesting transition of where Toronto's going to go as these young players get older and they start being integrated into the fold.
Every year at the start of the AUDL season, I think that's the most fascinating thing to follow of anything. What new young talent is going to emerge? And you hear coaches and captains talk about their new young players. You never really know until you see them yourself whether they're going to be good role players or whether they could be that next great guy, that next cornerstone anchor. I think the Toronto Rush feel Connor Armstrong could be that next Cameron Harris type.
DC coming out in his zone here with 14 seconds to go. They're trying to force Toronto into a long Hail Mary pass instead of being able to work it down the field.
5 seconds for Harris. Armitage is going to have to fire. He floats it to the end zone, but Delrico Johnson says no.
Great defense by the Breeze, able to run out the clock. Have everybody slowly moving back. 2 deeps in position in case the early throw goes up.
So the Breeze win the opening quarter 7-4 here in our first AUDL game of the week of the season. 1 down, 3 to go from our nation's capital. And Dallas takes possession, looking for the tie. And it was tipped off the hands of Chris Larberg and caught by Zach Welcome back to Gallaudet University here in Washington, D.C., where we are very honored to be joined by the Honorable Mayor of the District of Columbia, Madam Muriel Bowser. Thanks so much for coming out to Ultimate. This is your 2nd straight year watching the Breeze.
Yes, well, it's my pleasure to be here to cheer on the D.C. Breeze and beautiful Gallaudet.
When you saw Ultimate, Pro Ultimate for the first time last year, what'd you think?
Well, I thought it was a lot of fun. I think we were here when the D.C. Breeze was charging towards a championship. It was a unseasonably cold day, but still hardy fans came out to cheer on their team. What people don't realize about Washington is we're known for politics and government, but really we're a sports town, and we get behind our teams, and D.C. Breeze is no exception.
I was a poli-sci major in college. I would love to get all geeky poli-sci with you, but let's talk about Ultimate and the District of Columbia. I know under your leadership and with some of your staff has been very involved in creating new recreational parks and pushing Ultimate in this area. What has that been like for you?
Well, in D.C., we have really invested in our parks and recreation facilities. A D.C. resident really shouldn't have to go more than 1 mile to find a fantastic park or pool or rec center. But when we don't just want buildings and great fields, we want great activities on those fields. So we've been very fortunate for the league to partner with us, and now 10 of our recreation facilities have Ultimate Frisbee teams.
Have you tried to throw the Frisbee much yourself?
Well, I'm generally pretty good at things I put my mind to.
Have you tried?
I haven't been out. I haven't thrown a Frisbee in quite a long time.
So what you're saying,
I understand this one is a little bit different.
So if you're saying if you gave it a try, I'm sure you would be great.
If I gave it a
with
try,
a little coaching from some of these great players.
I'd be pretty great.
Mayor Bowser, thanks so much for joining us. Great to meet you.
My
Enjoy
pleasure.
the nice weather today.
You bet. Go Breeze.
That's the Honorable Mayor Muriel Bowser of Washington, D.C. Cool to get a chance to visit with her. And the Breeze begin the second quarter on defense with a 3-goal lead. Toronto's offense with Thompson McKnight, Connor Armstrong, Steve Armitage, Jeff Lindquist, Andrew Cowell, Isaiah Massick-Kelly, and Cameron Harris.
Good adjustment from Toronto here. A different looking set play than we've seen before.
And Carroll makes the contested catch. It looked like Swift was there, but Carroll climbed the ladder first.
I've had to coach against Andrew Carroll at all levels, including college. He is so tough to guard. And it's one of the things here is that normally you're concerned about him because of the defensive side. He's going to try to take away one of your best players. And now on offense, he's just using that speed against you.
What was your first reaction when you've seen him move from defense to offense? Because he did not play that many O-line points in past years.
It was a little bit of relief, and then that relief quickly turned into a little bit of despair
I
after
bet.
you saw how good offensively he could be as well. He can play a variety of roles. He can handle. He's got the disc skills to do it. And of course, he's a great cutter. It's almost like he allows your offense to get a couple of freebie goals a game, which really opens things up for other players.
That's Matt Kerrigan resetting it back to Alan Kolick, and there was some congestion downfield, which led to a pick. Max Castle and Lloyd Blake got a little tangled up in their defenders. Kolick thought about the deep shot toward Blake, resets underneath. This is Monroe. Up the line, Kolick. Castle.
He does a great job of finding the soft spot within the poaches.
Tough catch over the shoulder by Monroe. And then through the double team into the end zone for the goal. Monroe to Castle. Two young kids that could be playing Ultimate here in DC for a long time.
If you're Toronto in this instance, there's a couple of these throws where you're going to hang your head a little bit, and that's the tough part, is that you can't worry too much about getting back in this game instantaneously. But in these moments, you had a couple of throws that hung in the air that looked like they could have been blocked. And it's frustrating as a defender. You have to come off the field, and that's why it's important to have that. You see Jeff Powell on the sideline right now giving out instructions. You need that experience on the sideline. You need those players to help them get back up into the game.
And Jeff Powell inactive today for the Rush. Remember, he was involved in the controversial collision in the playoff game last year with DC, colliding with Markham Schaffner, resulted in a controversial one-game suspension. He didn't play at championship weekend. Powell did play yesterday, but some nicks and bruises and not in the lineup today. Longtime defensive leader for Toronto.
Well, of course, all of these teams are trying to vie to be first in the East, but it's likely that we're going to see New York, Toronto, and DC fight it out in the playoffs. And so you can always get the job done. For a lot of these teams in these games, it's about growth. And for Toronto, you breathe a little bit of sigh of relief because you come away from a win with New York.
Wow. Lack of concentration there by Massac Kelly. You don't see that very often.
And that could be from a lack of focus. It can be from tired legs. Toronto's already been running pretty hard here early on in the game.
They drove down to New York on Friday, got in around midnight, played yesterday afternoon around 5 o'clock, and then arrived in DC around midnight. That sneaks in there to Johnson. He's got 2 goals and a couple of Ds already. And a timeout was called from the DC sideline. Perhaps some concern that Johnson would not find the reset in time. You know, there's so much infusion of talent on both these teams. And for DC in particular, you know, chatting with a guy like Jonathan Neely, who's been in this program forever, he said that in the past, it's always kind of felt like we've had our veteran core, and we've never really felt challenged. And then there's these other guys that, yeah, they have potential, but the old vets weren't really worried about their spots. He said that's now totally changed. And I think the Toronto guys are feeling the same pressure too. The Yearwoods, the Lindquists, the McKnights. Some of these young kids are going to grow into roles that are going to eventually knock these old guys out of the rotation.
Yeah, these old guys like Jeff Lindquist, like you said. Like
Neely old guy, I mean, Lindquist is 33 years old next May.
Yeah, but that's what we're seeing in terms of Ultimate, and that's great for both of these organizations. You want to see that infusion of young talent. You want to see them push other players to get better, and that's the only way that it happens. It's really tough, like you said, when you have this veteran core that goes unchallenged, and that's the case for a lot of teams where guys aren't being pushed in practice.
There's Shooter Hasty. veteran coach of the Toronto Rush. He was an assistant for a couple years under Evan Phillips, and now he's the head coach and the general manager of this franchise. I was chatting with him on Saturday morning yesterday. He was on his way to New York, and he was just giddy talking about some of the guys who have made strides from last year, some of the new players, and that was too easy. Schaffner shakes free of his defender, and Neely picks up the dime to make it 9-5 DC.
Schaffner getting some stretching in. Calisthenics getting ready to go. That's a huge lead for DC, and it's certainly not insurmountable at this point in time, but they seem fresher.
Well, that goal right there tied him for most goals in the Schaffner family in the AUDL this year. Of course, his younger sister, Jessie, made history last week, becoming the first female in AUDL history to catch a goal in the AUDL. And that was a little Jessie Schaffner up like a very similar goal, almost as if they tried to make it look that way.
It's part of the family business. I think McKenzie thought he had great positioning there to just kind of lean on Schaffner. And once Schaffner made one little move, got the ounce of separation, it's an easy goal. You see teams come down on Toronto soft because they want to stop the set play, but McKnight just doesn't bite on it.
Harris looking for Carroll. He's got him. About 7 yards shy of the goal line. Reset back to McKnight, and then Masick Kelly make sure to secure that one. Adrian Yearwood to Harris, underneath the reach of McDonald, and he connects with Masick Kelly for the score.
At any given time, Cam Harris can be the best player on the planet. He's got great length, he's got great speed, the ability to pluck the disc out of the air, and ability to bomb it as well. It's just so hard to guard as a mark. Once he catches this disc, it's just too easy.
What do you see from Cam Harris from a mechanic standpoint? What makes his throws so good? Is it balance or reach, or I mean, it's probably a combination.
Yeah, I think you've got to go with balance first and foremost. It's incredibly important when trying to deliver a disc downfield. There's a lot of different motions that get the job done, and for Harris, it's just that he's very comfortable reaching out, which is going to be past the majority of defenders' arms, and it makes it really easy for him to deliver this power on throws where a lot of other players are going to lose power by overextending. Harris doesn't have to do that.
No Gord Harrison this weekend for Toronto, so Jarrett Marin doing most of the pulling. Schaffner lets it fly, looking for Wodach, and Jeff Wodach came back to get it. It didn't look like he had a chance, Brian, but he finds Monroe after the Superman-style grab.
I think what's remarkable about that play is that both players found ways to avoid the collision there, because that's the type of throw that can really spell disaster. Schaffner didn't get the distance he wanted on this throw, and Wodach just plucks it right out in front. It's a very dangerous area, and after that, it's a quick flip.
Well, the Toronto Rush had to deal with Jeff Wodach's younger brother, John, yesterday in New York. John Wodach out of the University of Connecticut, a really fine player for the Empire, but similar to yesterday, the Rush fell behind early. How would you compare and contrast the two Wodach brothers at this point in their careers?
John has the capability to be a handler, and he does a lot of damage with his throws. Jeff is more of just a little bit of more energetic cutter. Wodach has the ability to get set. John, sorry, I say Wodach just from coaching him. You don't know which one I'm talking about, but John has the ability to get open very easily and get him to make some incredible skies, whereas Jeff, he does kind of similar things, but they do it in different styles.
Yep. Yeah, Jeff Wodach kind of surprises you with how fast he is downfield. Led to a +64 that led the Breeze a year ago. This one testing David Cranston, and Cranston's up to the task.
What a great play by Cranston. He runs to the spot. He immediately goes for positioning instead of watching the disc. Gets in front of Lindquist, and so that way Lindquist doesn't have a chance at the play. A lot of other defenders would wait and try to go up for a 50-50 disc, which would give Lindquist an advantage.
Great undercut from Chuck Cantone after Cranston caught the first. Into the red zone to McDonald. And Masekele made contact on the fake. So 5 yards away from the goal line. Cranston with the left hand sliding for the bookends. And DC has its largest lead yet, 11-6.
Cranston, after making the great defensive play on the other side of the field, caps it off with the bookends. Gets open by a step on Lindquist, and that's all he's going to need. And just going back to that defensive play. The ability to run to a spot in front of where the offense is going, that's great intelligence. That's great game IQ from Cranston. And here we'll see the goal.
A little bit low, a little dicey. You saw McDonald flinch after the release. And he'll breathe a sigh of relief and let some frustration out perhaps with this pull. Rowan McDonald trying to become a bit of a social media superstar with his creative throwing videos. I have really enjoyed watching those, and I have learned a lot of throws that I'd never seen before.
Same here, and I didn't know there were more throws that I could learn, but every week it seems like there's a new one.
Although you kind of showed me the pizza pie last year a little bit.
Yeah, there's some of them I know how to do. I dabble a little bit. I just don't have the same social media presence as Rowan. I'll leave it to him.
How did you learn the pizza pie?
Just experimenting. You have enough time with a disc, you're going to find some weird ways to throw it.
Rowan McDonald brings a positive energy that his teammates rave about. You can see that from the videos. And it's honestly not that dissimilar from the positive energy that Brody Smith brings and how he's made his throwing empire as Toronto slices through the DC defense there. Jarrett Marin catches the goal for the Rush.
And that was a decision by the DC Breeze to throw zone defense and try to get some double teams. And you're early on in the first half, well, a little bit later here into the second quarter. And as a coach, you're trying to think about what strategy should employ, what adjustments I should make. So you try. There's a phrase that says never lose a game without trying zone at least once as with the defense. But in this case, your defense has been producing so many turnovers by just playing straight man-to-man, giving great pressure. Why go to zone? Why try to switch it up when things are working for you? It's a tough choice as a coach because you can come out in that zone and just keep Toronto guessing.
As a coach, do you try to remind yourself not to overcoach?
There are definitely times of that. I think there are a lot of times where players have heard what they need to hear, and it's a matter for them to go out and do it.
Monroe with a nice cut downfield, shakes free of his defender. Looking long to the end zone. Max Castle hauls it in for DC.
When you take a look across the field right now, Toronto's not in a good headspace, and not that any team really would be because everything seems to be clicking here for the Breeze. Just Monroe able to put it up in the back of the end zone, and this is a disc that could be blocked. It falls just right in. Good positioning. But Toronto needs some young blood here to kind of pick them up. They need some pressure defense. They need a big play.
They need young blood like Monroe and Castle. They've connected twice here in this quarter. Max Castle, a part of the first University of Maryland college team to make nationals in 2015. And some of the DC veterans were thinking a few years back, why don't we have more Maryland guys in our program? They're kind of the best college team in the area right now. And gradually, some of those University of Maryland guys have infiltrated the team. A guy like John Walden, who will be on the D-line today. Obviously, Max Castle. Andrew Carroll's quick enough to run it down and makes it look easy with a clap catch.
I love this opening set play that Toronto is showing. It's pretty simple. It's coming out of a vertical stack. You're going to see kind of what we call the 1, 2, 3, 4 cut. In this case, you have the one who catches the disc, gives it to 2. After that, 2 is going to find 3 on a swing pass, so a lateral pass to either here. Before it was Isaiah Mazzucchelli. Here it's Cam Harris. And after that, it's the same look to the 4, which is going to be Andrew Carroll. And look how wide open he is. He's jogging at the end of that play. He makes it so easy. Toronto was in really need of a free, quick goal. That's a great way to keep the pressure back on DC. Now you get a block. You can get right back in this game and start to close the gap.
See Cam Harris sitting on the bench to the left of Carroll. Yesterday, Harris scored his 150th AUDL goal, and he's just the second player in the history of the league with 150 goals and 150 assists. He joins the timeless Keenan Plew of the Indianapolis AlleyCats in that department. But Harris is one of about 8 guys who have been on the rush since the beginning and are still playing today. Oh, and there's Alan Kolick showing he's got some hops too. How about those springs from the lanky lefty?
Well, everything's going the Breeze way. I mean, apparently they just went into Madden and they dialed up the Hail Mary when they got 4 people going for the same disc. This is Jeff Wodatch trying to launch it in the air to Schaffner, and Schaffner
is like an end of quarter buzzer beater.
Yeah, we still got 6 minutes to go, so I don't know what they're thinking, but it doesn't really matter right now. The DC Breeze are just feeling themselves.
How about that? Alan Kolick with his second goal of the game. I mean, we've seen him make plays as a downfield cutter. Certainly he has made his name more as a thrower. But you don't think of him as a guy to posterize an opponent by going up, maybe by going out, but not up. And it does feel like everything is going DC's way. Initiating again to Harris, and he just barely keeps it alive. That wasn't supposed to be that hard. Floating it out there, Lindquist, not enough legs, not enough float on the toss from McKnight.
It's tough to put float on these tosses to this direction. The wind is going to be able to kind of blow that down into the ground. And that's what we saw earlier, some throws to this end zone. They're just going to dive a little bit. You see players having to go to the ground to make the catch.
They call a stall on McDonald, and Toronto's Armstrong quickly picks up.
Did that seem like 7 seconds to you?
It didn't. Maybe they're saying he didn't pick it up fast enough, and perhaps that's why the count was initiated, because I agree.
That felt like 3 seconds
there. From the time he set a pivot foot, it didn't seem like 7 seconds at all. Nonetheless, Toronto needed a break.
Now the referee right now is talking to Daryl Stanley, the coach of the DC Breeze, and it seems like that might have been the case because you don't see the Breeze arguing about it. So it must have been that the play was just kind of the disc was put into play, and after that, Toronto gets a nice break.
Jarrett Marin, another pull for Toronto.
No, he's banged up before the game, but he's so valuable, and he's just pinning DC deeper than Toronto. Starts with the disc. Toronto starting with the disc around the 40-yard line. DC here on the 20 and further beyond.
Another impressive snag by Kolick. Castle takes the chance looking for Monroe. Gorgeous.
They're just calibrated into this wind, and sometimes you see teams miss. Toronto just missed on a shot similar to that one on this side of the field to the end zone, but for DC, everything just seems to be almost perfect.
Well, the Breeze scored 7 goals in the first quarter, led 7-4. They've already scored 7 goals here in the second quarter. There's still 4.5 minutes to play.
Doesn't matter who it is, it seems. Castle, Kolick, Schaffner, they're doing a great job of breaking the mark, putting a lot of pressure on the defense.
Austin Bartenstein with the pull. DC excited about what Austin Bartenstein can bring to this team's D-line. Thinking he could be something of a D-line quarterback. Not a real well-known player as, wow, Kelly shows off his ability to get horizontal. Lindquist, high release flick. Carroll, high release catch. And a laser finds Harris in the red zone. And Lindquist colliding with Cranston. Johnson was picked. And I think Lindquist might be arguing that Johnson contacted him and forced him into Cranston, and Cranston kind of took the really bad business of it. But they are going to call the foul against Toronto. And Jeff Lindquist, Toronto native, went to Guelph. One of the creative throwers in the game, initiates it to Yearwood, who finds Andrew Carroll. And I mean, how many times is Andrew Carroll going to be open in the end zone this year?
It's really tough to guard him. Toronto's figuring that out, and they're getting some easy goals. They're staying within striking distance, and it's because Carroll is finding ways to burn him deep. And that was what we saw earlier. At the beginning of this play, we actually saw DC Breeze trying to make some adjustment. They're leaving Delrico Johnson hanging in the deep space, expecting that throw. This one is just going to be a quick flip. And then we saw Isaiah Masekeli. He had to lay out for that pass. Nobody was around him. That was because Johnson just let him go back towards the disc.
The Toronto Rush back within 4. Isaiah Masekeli, not the player that Andrew Carroll has been today. Carroll has been the go-to guy for the Rush offense.
It's all about who you choose to take away.
Big bid from Marin. He pulled and then got down there for that bid. Almost got it against Neely. Now looking for Monroe. He turns on the Jets. Tyler Monroe. Welcome.
He is something else. I tell you what, you talked about him kind of having this be his coming out year, and he certainly made some plays last year, but holy cow, I didn't think he was going to get this disc, and look at him, he just turns on the Jets.
A typical feathery throw from Alan Kolick. And again, Tyler Monroe, native of Seattle, now at George Washington here in DC, and he just turned 22 on March 25th.
That's scary for anybody else in the league. He's doing a great job of finding the deep space, and for DC, it doesn't matter. It's find different throwers that can put it. Castle's doing it, Kolick's doing it, finding those receivers, whether it's Wodach, whether it's Moreau.
Masekeli takes off. McKnight put it, and that's what Isaiah Masekeli can do. And they call that a score, his first point of contact in the end zone for Toronto.
It's a game of chess right now. DC tries to bite on the first underneath pass, and they kind of forget, and this is what Toronto does well, is they lure you into a sense of security that the first pass from McKnight is going to be a break, it's going to be a lateral pass. But McKnight can do well as a hucker.
I mean, I think people forget how dominant Isaiah Masekeli was 2 years ago, and that was the season when Mark Lloyd got injured. He had had such the dominant 2014 season. Masekeli was a rookie in the AUDL in 2014. He wasn't on the first couple rush teams, or the first rush team, I should say. But when he showed up, he had a plus-minus that year of 91, which is the 5th best plus-minus in the history of the league. In a single season, last year, Jacksonville's Misha Freystadter had the best. Tyler DiGirolamo's 2015, Bo Kittredge a couple years ago, and Justin Allen of Raleigh a couple years ago. That's your top four, and Isaiah Masekele's right there. And the DC Breeze are looking long too. Too long for Markham Schaffner.
Toronto had switched things up. They had been forcing backhand for most of the game, and here they went with a forced forehand, and then Greg Ellis poaching in the lane. They let him throw it to Schaffner deep.
And Toronto will take its first time out of the second half. The rush looking for a break. The O-line coming back in for Shooter Hasty with a rush trailing by 4. Well, you never know what you're going to get weather-wise in April in the AUDL. Obviously, a lot of South Division teams, West Coast teams in action, the Eastern Division, the Midwest Divisions pushing their schedule back a little bit, but we could not have been blessed with better weather today. It's warm, but not too warm. A slight breeze, but not too much wind. It is picture perfect, and a great crowd on hand here at Gallaudet University, the home of the DC Breeze once again in 2017. Cool to have the commissioner in the house. The mayor of Washington, D.C. is here. And the community has really rallied around this team, Brian. The Washington, D.C. City Council has offered all sorts of official support, trying to both raise awareness of this team and also just create energy around this team that was a title contender a year ago.
DC comes out with a zone look, trying to force a double team along the sideline and force Toronto into some mistakes, but Toronto just played in a windy game yesterday. They're kind of calibrated to play this style. I'm not sure this is going to put the pressure they want to see on them. Looks like they've transitioned to person.
Andrew Carroll. Almost another drop for Masekele, but he, on the second effort, secured it. Lindquist, harassed by Johnson. Looking to the end zone, not much space to work with, and Carroll may have been worried about the footwork. In addition to the disc, it's incomplete.
Tough break for Toronto. You have it on the goal line after the timeout with 1:50 to go. Would have brought you within 3, and that's a reasonable halftime deficit to overcome. But everything's been breaking the Breeze's way.
Lindquist collided with Johnson on the under. Lindquist asking for an integrity rule. There certainly was contact, even though it appeared when the disc went in the air like Lindquist was going to make the play.
Lindquist gave him a little bit of shoulder. I think it was a good call by the referee.
Yeah, I'm with you. And Toronto gets the disc back with some Andrew Carroll handler defense. McKnight looking for Harris. The rush back within 3.
And now you can hear the rush sideline. The crowd's been silenced a little bit here. The rush sideline getting back into it, bringing that energy that they're going to need to come back in this game. This is just too easy.
What has allowed Thompson McKnight to be such a rock for this championship caliber program for so long?
He's very patient with the disc. He's a great field general. You don't see him make too many mistakes. He's very good at kind of operating the play, being patient, seeing the field, good vision, good game IQ. And on top of that, some physical gifts they're going to help him.
It's his 5th AUDL season. He played hockey when he was younger. Thompson McKnight, because of both his longevity, the team he's played on, and his skill, one of the most prolific throwers in the history of the league. And he's patient. I mean, you talked about that. He's fine letting his other teammates make the play. That disc floating, Kerrigan tracks it down, throws through the contact. There's a foul coming if this isn't caught by the offense. And there goes Mike McKenzie soaring through. Contact on the throw, it will come back. Jackie Howe commits the foul.
35 seconds to go, that's a pretty big one.
Stick around at halftime. The AUDL commissioner will join us. Lots to talk about going on with this league on this busy Sunday. 3 games going on. Jonathan Martin can't get there. Eric Miner on the under with 22 seconds to go to Kerrigan, and more contact with Howe.
I thought that was a minor amount of contact, and through most of this game they've been letting both teams play. Certainly some there, but don't think it affected things that much.
Up high and into the end zone for the Breeze. That's Jonathan Neely's first goal of the game.
You can really see the conditioning and strength training that Jonathan Neely has committed to over the last couple of seasons. He's been a handler. He's been a guy that delivers the disc well. But in the last 2 seasons, I've been very impressed with his ability in terms of just athleticism. Here, he's getting up high. He's been able to make other teams pay for any mistakes they make. There are some handlers that go out there and they just kind of manage the game, and there are other handlers that really put pressure on the defense, making the collapse, whether it be by throws or by their quickness, and Neely's kind of entering into that game.
Well, Brian, it's funny. Jonathan Neely has really gotten kind of a PhD in strength and conditioning and training because of his days editing for the website Skide Magazine, and it was his job to edit the weekly Ultimate Training column that Tim Morrill or Ren Caldwell or Marissa Whitmer would write. And because of that, he read it super closely, and he would always ask follow-up questions to help them try to clarify, as an editor would. And because of that, he gleaned all that knowledge for himself. Armstrong has to fire, and he doesn't do it. And that'll be the end of the half. Even if Kolek runs this down, it won't count. But a good half for the DC Breeze as they take a 16-12 lead over the Toronto Rush into the half. Brian, your quick thoughts on how those first 24 minutes transpired.
All of these breaks have gone the Breeze way, and for Toronto to only be down 3, that's pretty amazing. Toronto has kind of stayed the course by being able to take some shots to Andrew Carroll, show some different offensive sets. Still a great potential for this game to get close in the second half.
16-12 is the score. It's a 4-score game at the half. DC in front of Toronto. We'll take a quick timeout, and when we come back, a very special guest, the second of the day, the commissioner of the AUDL is in the house, and he joins us as our AUDL Game of the Week continues.
This piece with Eric is amazing to me. It's right in line with what we I think is critical for kids, and that is to know their bodies.
The kids have really gotten into having speakers here that aren't just their teachers.
And I think the clinicians did a fantastic job. All the kids were engaged, none of them were distracted. They seemed to get into it right away.
I just want to reach out to Eric and tell him, you know, thank you for coming and sharing the message that our kids can speak up. Early recognition is critical, and I look forward to doing more things with Eric in the future.
It's been great for us as a staff and for our students to experience the message you guys have. And
it's halftime here at Gallaudet University in our nation's capital, and I am joined up here in the broadcast booth by the commissioner of the AUDL, Steve Gordon, as we kick off another year of our coverage. The 6th season of the AUDL has begun, and Steve, I'm sure it's gratifying for you to see the league where it is now. What is it like when you wake up every morning these days and see the AUDL compared to what it was like 5 years ago when you would wake up in the morning and see the AUDL?
Yeah, Evan, it's certainly obviously a lot different. You know, we went from when I started in this, which was year 2, 12 teams, to what we're at now. You know, we've got all different kinds of media that we didn't have in the past. Obviously, tonight we're launching with 11 Sports, first time on cable ever. So these are huge steps that are just steps in a larger long-term plan.
It is great to be on 11 Sports. It's great to have all the viewers with us. How did that come together? It was just announced about a week before the season.
Yeah, it's you know, in startup leagues, like you said, we're in year 6, and a lot of things happen maybe quicker than they would when you're a little more established. And there was a relationship we had with a prior cable provider that we were going to be broadcasting with that didn't come to fruition, and ironically, 11 purchased that station, or that network, I should say, and touched base with us and said that they were as interested, if not more, as the first entity was, and it was just an easy decision to go forward once that happened.
And now in year 6, you look around at the competitive landscape of the league, and certainly there are favorites like the Dallas Roughnecks, like the Toronto Rush, and some favorites like the San Francisco FlameThrowers are learning that no game is going to be easy. You saw what happened in the West Division last night with San Jose, a team that most people picked to be last in that division, beat the team that everyone was picking to be first. What was your reaction when you saw that?
2 things. First of all, surprised, you know, that no doubt about that, and 2, excited because it just continues to show the competitive landscape that's in this sport, like many sports, where you can't just mail it in. You got to show up in the field and you got to win.
What should fans of the AUDL be looking forward to as this season progresses and as you start thinking about the strategic plan for this league in the years to come?
Well, Evan, a lot has changed, obviously, with the developments with MLU. So we have a different focus. You know, a lot of time in the past, we had to focus a lot of energies on a competitive landscape that we don't have to put quite as much energies in. So it allows for us to put those energies in another direction, and it's making a lot of sense with the direction that we're going now. As we continue to grow and go through all the steps that we are, we're just going to see exponential things happening that maybe people hadn't thought of that we might bring to the table, but we will.
What goes through your mind as the commissioner in the league when you see a crowd like this on a day like this?
I don't know what goes in my mind. It's what I get chills. I get goosebumps. I love seeing. Obviously, you can I don't know on the broadcast if you can hear it.
Yep.
But there's a huge, lively crowd here. Great day, great event, and it's everything that we thought this league was going to be. Great ultimate, but the expanded event is just as big. Yeah,
it's really special to be a part of. Commissioner Steve Gordon, thank you for being here. Thank you for joining us, and we will talk to you down the road, I'm sure.
Well, and if those that don't know, congratulations, Mr. Married Man.
Yes,
yes. Yeah, that is nuptials and happy man. So
thank
congratulations.
You. The weight is a little thrown off wearing a wedding ring for the first time on the air. It's thrown me off a bit, but I will fight through it. And I just noticed your unbiased uniform here, wearing a Breeze polo and a Toronto Rush hat. So the commissioner, always a politician in the nation's capital, coincidentally as well. We'll take a timeout. 16-12 is your halftime score. Brian Jones rejoins me when we come back to Washington, D.C.
Yeah, I loved that you guys talk about cancer awareness, and it's more about body awareness and knowing their own bodies.
And I think Eric is a wonderful way to bring this into school. You come with a complete program.
The information is good. It's presented in a very professional way. The instructors do an excellent job.
I think the kids overall had a great time. I can see from their responses that they wanted us to get some more Ultimate Discs in the school, and that we'll be playing all the way into the spring and summer.
We really appreciated you coming out. We love the message you guys send.
Yeah, thank you for coming out.
Thank you, Eric, for coming out to the Pittsburgh area. It's a great experience for our kids.
Thank you for sharing your message with the kids. We really appreciate the energy that you've brought, and I really encourage anybody else who might be interested in this program to bring them on in.
It's a 4-goal difference at the break. The Toronto Rush have only lost 4 games in 4 AUDL seasons, but they're down by 4 at the half today. Brian Jones rejoins me here in the booth, and in the first half, you said it so many times, it just felt like everything went DC's way.
Yeah, but a lot of that was because they made it go their way. We saw some great defensive blocks early on. The defense was kind of just tuned into what Toronto wanted. DC was able to build that lead and keep that lead throughout the entire half. Just saw some great, incredible defensive plays. This one a bit over the shoulder of Jeff Lindquist. That's really the type of block that can open things up. And from there, Wodach is able to come back and get the sky. And that's kind of where everything started. It felt like it just kept heading the DC Breeze's way. They got a couple of breaks. They skied a couple of piles on some bad decisions. And Toronto, though, has kept this game within striking distance by adjusting a little bit with their offensive sets.
DC led wire to wire, took a 3-0 lead, then Toronto made it 3-2 with a break back, but the Rush have never led in this game. The largest lead was at 5 by DC, and it's a 4-point lead at the half, second half between Toronto and DC when we come back. And Dallas takes possession, looking for the tie. And it was tipped off the hands of Chris Larberg and caught by Zach .12 as the third quarter is about 2 minutes away from beginning, which gives us a chance to run down what has happened in the league in the first 2 weeks. Let's tell you what's happening right now in Dallas. There are a lot of people that thought that today might be the day the Roughnecks would lose for the first time in the league. So far, Brian, it's not looking like it. 15-8, the Roughnecks are leading the Flyers right now in the Lone Star State.
We saw for the Roughnecks last year not only that top talent come through, but a lot of that depth really start to just blossom throughout the rest of the season. And some top talent has departed, but that depth is still there, and it's going to make them very formidable.
Later today out west, Los Angeles will host Vancouver. The Aviators 1-0 after a win last week against a San Diego team that was excited to debut some of its former Aviator players. And former DC Breeze cutter Tom Doy was very good. So was Mark L. Bogan. He had 11 goals last week for the Aviators. Los Angeles trying to get to 2-0 today against the 0-1 Riptide, who lost against Seattle last week. Let's tell you about what happened yesterday in the league. We mentioned Raleigh. They got a win on the road against Austin. Jonathan Nethercutt, Jacob Fairfax played very well. The biggest surprise of the day yesterday, though, Brian, unquestionably was what happened out in the Bay Area at Foothill College. The San Jose Spiders, remember, they're a two-time champion, but certainly not the same roster they had in 2014 and 2015. The San Francisco FlameThrowers beat San Jose last week in Oakland. Yesterday, the Spiders got revenge, 24-22, with a really strong second-half performance.
It looked like late that San Francisco was going to pull away, and San Jose just started rattling off those points right at the waning moments, put the game in their favor.
Now, whenever you see an upset like that, your first thought is, well, was this team missing all of its good players? Because sometimes in the AUDL, teams will be without some of their top players for a variety of reasons. Yesterday, San Francisco was without Grant Lindsley, Joel Schlockett, Patrick Bayless, Andrew Hagan, Byron Liu, Sam Canner, Jordan Marcy. And you might think, well, that must be all their good players. But the reality is they had Bo Kittredge and Cassidy Rasmussen and Marcelo Sanchez and Mac Taylor and Lucas Dahlman and Greg Cohen and Nathan White and others. And San Jose still got the win. The Spiders' offensive line, led by Chuck Cow and Justin Norden and Jackson Stearns and Stephen Chang, has been really impressive going against San Francisco's defenders the past 2 weeks.
The depth in the Bay Area is just incredible. To be able to field two teams like that and have them battle it out. The other team, the other players you listed could almost be that entire other team. They could add a third team to the area that could compete with everybody else.
It really is something, and who knows how the West will continue and unfold. If San Francisco can be knocked off on any given night by a team like San Jose, well, then that division is truly wide open, especially with what Los Angeles has done. How good did Seattle look last week? Their offensive line was not broken, led by Mark Burton and Mario O'Brien and Adam Simon and Khalif El-Salam.
Seattle knows what they're doing. There's something in the water. We talked about some athletes here today that were getting the job done from Seattle. I think almost the stranglehold they have on youth is just incredible.
Yep.
Those youth programs in high school just building each other up. They're going to have that pipeline of talent for years to come.
Well, we're seeing one of those youth products today from Seattle, Washington. It's Tyler Monroe, who went from Seattle, Washington to George Washington, and now is here in the nation's capital as a very talented player. He's the type of guy you wonder if he's going to stay in D.C. after college, or could he go back home and be the next great player in Seattle? Who knows? Jarrett Marin ready to pull to begin the second half. One other score to mention from yesterday in the Midwest, the AlleyCats got their first win of the year. Indy defeating Detroit 25-15. The AlleyCats O-line was broken on the first point of the game and then was only broken once the rest of the day. Rick Gross had a big day, 5 goals and 4 Ds. And there's contact downfield. And the referees are going to talk about this one as DC starts the second half on offense.
It's hard to tell from all the way up here, but it looks like it's going to be a strip call. But I thought Monroe had the disc in his hands before the defender was able to knock it out. Looks like it's staying with Monroe.
A really close call. That's Ian McKenzie.
McKenzie just maybe a little bit late.
Somehow that was landing up, but before the throw, Kai Hudak blew the whistle.
I mean, this should be a goal. I think that the referee might be doing his job right here in terms of enforcing the foul because the whistle was blown, and now they're going to center it, but this should be a goal.
Feels like we had more whistles in the first 30 seconds of this quarter than we had in the entire first half. Wodach will see the double team. And pretty good defense near the goal line by Toronto, but only so much can be done to try and stop Alan Kolick.
This is what's so tough about employing the double team, and I don't think a lot of teams have figured it out. There's just that combination of how the defense is supposed to react to where what you're taking away as a mark and then what you're able to take away downfield. So that way it's kind of a team defensive mentality, and so that way the marks and the downfield defensive positioning works together. Here, it just causes the defense to kind of overplay every single move the offensive team makes. And as a result, Wodach is able to kind of go back and forth. Teams haven't really found a way as a defense to coordinate, what am I doing downfield with what I'm doing with that double team as well? What cut should I be allowing to go? and what cut should I prevent the other team from making. And as a result, Toronto plays really aggressive defense, and when you overplay against Alan Kolek, he's going to burn you.
Toronto yesterday made a critical adjustment in halftime against the New York Empire. They were down 10-9. Watching it as I waited on the tarmac of my airplane coming to DC, a few mechanical errors allowed me to watch the rest of the game. Watching it, it felt like Toronto should have been down more at halftime yesterday. It felt like New York had really outplayed them, and the fact that the Empire only led by 1 was telling, because Toronto dominated the second half after a couple of adjustments, and one of them is basically giving it to Cameron Harris and letting him look for Andrew Carroll off the pull.
This is just, it's really different look for the Toronto offense, but they're taking advantage of the speed of Andrew Carroll so well. This is out of a vertical stack. I can't tell you for how many years how it's been almost a guarantee that you're going to come down on the defensive side and you're going to see a split stack from Toronto. Coming out of this vertical stack, it's a great look for them because they're able to get Cam Harris on the lateral move. And the defense starts out with good positioning, but it doesn't matter against Andrew Carroll. He's got the speed to turn this from a well-guarded cut to just wide open by 20 yards.
So there were 2 members of the Toronto Rush in the preseason top 50 candidates for MVP column that I scribed for the Tuesday toss. Cameron Harris and Isaiah Massett-Kelly were the 2 that I mentioned in the top 50. The head coach of the Rush, Shooter Hasty, said, you may have overlooked Andrew Carroll. And I said to him, I think Carroll's great, but he's too unselfish. He's too nice to be the MVP. And he said this year he's going for it a little bit more. Looking to the end zone, it's Schaffner eluding the magnificent bid of McKenzie.
McKenzie, great effort there, great run down, but it's not enough. Kolek's so powerful with this flick, and that's what makes him so hard to mark. It's so tough. You get it in this position, and then the lefty, it's so easy to put this out in the space, and Martin's got a good mark. Kolek has just enough room, and it's right on the money. Schaffner can just run it down.
Athletic bid from McKenzie, and he should be praised for not going into the back of Schaffner there. All sorts of talk and conversation and ultimate about bidding for discs and the right way to do it. I think that was the right way right there. Just over a minute gone here in the third quarter. Evan Lepler, Brian Jones with you from Washington, D.C. Our first AUDL game of the week of the season, and how about that? It was deflected by David Bloodgame and right back to Thompson McKnight.
Toronto tried running the same set play. DC did a better job there of containing Carroll in the first look, but that's a second drop of the day for Massett-Kelly.
More than he's had in some seasons.
We've been singing his praises, and rightly so. He's incredibly talented, but that's just a disappointing performance so far.
And that's got to be a focus thing, right?
Sometimes it's just you could call it a focus thing, and certainly you could describe it that way. But anytime you're just in your own head and you're thinking too much, you're thinking about what to do next instead of just reacting to the play and in a good rhythm, you can start seeing those mistakes.
That was an ambitious throw, and it worked out for Rowan McDonald. Cantone got there before the poaching Massett-Kelly, and then McDonald comes flying into the end zone.
A little bit of arguing there about the hop into the end zone, but great IO flick. It looked like Massett-Kelly might be able to kind of get into this area and get a great block. And then he's going to look for McDowell coming down. Let's see here if he hops. Looked pretty good to me. Maybe my eyes aren't as good as some of those Toronto players out there.
So Rowan McDonald with the score. That's a break for the Breeze, and their lead widens to a half dozen at 19-13. I don't know about you, Brian. When that throw went up, in the back of my mind, the voice was saying, this is not going to work, and yet it did.
It's a hard throw to make, and it's also out of the ordinary, so it's just a little bit different. DC trying to switch it up, and I think this is a result of just the pressure that and the spacing that Toronto has created with their pull plays.
How about that defensive effort This time it's the veteran John Agan, still making plays at age 33.
In that case, too, this is a defensive line out there for Toronto. Zone.
Lloyd Blake, Rowan McDonald. The breeze gaining steam here in DC.
The DC Breeze have a depth at throwing that is hard to find, I think, on a lot of other teams. And they are just abusing the marks here of Toronto. Every single time, it doesn't matter. The marks aren't taking anything away. There has to be some adjustment on that. That's also a factor of guarding lefties. Lloyd Blake is something they haven't had to game plan for before, and he's been able to put a couple of them right on the money.
Blake, the James Madison product. He's got size, he's got throws, comes from a baseball background, and now really can do it on the ultimate field.
I don't know about you, but I know we kind of, our college days overlapped, but the best party I've ever been to in the ultimate game was at James Madison, the Hellfish Bonanza tournament.
The Hellfish Bonanza had that reputation, and I got to tell you, despite playing in that tournament either 3 or 4 years, I was not cool enough to make it to the party. I was always focused on resting up for Sunday.
Oh, we always decided.
Which I'm sure people are just shaking their heads around the world right now.
We rolled up in suits, and that's something that a little bit more old school as DC looking to open it up more.
McDonald got it. Just shy of the goal line. And that will work. Marcus Thaw had a couple Ds early. Now he's got the goal, and the Breeze are pulling away here early in the third.
Another unforced error gives it back and leads to an 8-point lead. Everything going the Breeze way.
So certainly with the circumstances surrounding this game, Toronto played yesterday. They're missing some good players, certainly Mark Lloyd, Gord Harrison, Remy Ojo. They're not 100%, although they've got a very good roster. This DC team, young, a little mysterious, mixing in the new guys with the vets. I don't think anyone is shocked that DC is playing really well today. But historically, the Toronto Rush have rolled over East Division opponents, especially teams based in the U.S. And they have not been the nail like this to DC's hammer today in their franchise's history.
Oh, this is a surprising result. I certainly am not shocked that some young talent for DC is doing well, but I am shocked that it's an 8-point lead here in the early parts of the second half.
It was a 4-point game at the half, and so far a 5-1 run in this third quarter to double that 4-point lead to 8.
This is a great call here by the Breeze coming out in a zone, and the reason for that is you see Toronto's defensive line. Defensive lines almost never do any offensive zone work, and they have some good players out there. They have Ellis kind of manning the handler core, and they have Howe back.
But it's a spacing issue, and you learn that spacing from working on it, and as you said, they don't work on it very often.
You're going to force a lot of throws. You're going to get some opportunities. You're going to slow the pace down. Defensive lines are really good at providing energy. They're not great at being patient all the time.
Jonathan Martin had that disc deflected.
Martin's frustrated, and I don't blame him. I would be too. There's a lot of frustration on the sideline right now. You're trying to look for an answer. You're trying to look for something to go right. And I think in these moments, you just got to keep working hard.
Looking for Wodach. Just out of the reach of the veteran cutter.
Now if you're DC, you can afford to start to not really bleed the clock, but just you've got an 8-point advantage. You don't need to stress yourself out too much here by making players go both ways. And you have Wodach here. You know, a lot of people don't get to talk about his college career, but he was someone to be feared in the Metro East, playing at Bucknell and then GW. And he would play deep in these zones and just get free turnovers every day of the week.
Well, how about this defense? They sneaked the throw through to Tan. For a while, it was just Eric Miner. They call him Astro, bouncing back and forth like a rabbit, marking every handler he could.
Yeah, it's an example of a 2-3-2. You saw two deeps back, and now they've transitioned into individual matchups.
Looking toward the end zone, and well, it's been that kind of day for the Toronto Rush. Jason Hune, a 19-year-old that they're very excited about, just could not bring it in. Hune, a member of the Canadian U20 junior national team that went to Poland last July. Cranston underneath to Marshall, who had the initial D on Martin earlier in the point. And the Toronto defense not giving in. That's Mike McKenzie.
You could see the energy he brings, and we saw that yesterday, chasing down a long pass.
Seems like McKenzie still got some legs left. He needs a reset, though, and he didn't get it in time. It was a turnover anyway, but the whistle blew. It was called a stall, or, no, beg your pardon, a timeout was called from Sachin Reyna on the Toronto Rush sideline. So Reyna, who has played a lot in this league, now shifting into a coaching role. He'll be very proud of himself for that timeout call.
Sometimes that's the best thing you can do as a coach, is just key in those moments when you know a younger player has the disc. And we actually saw a couple of calls this game just like that. Stall count getting high. Thought it was going to be a turnover here, but.
Well, it's an 8-score game right now, Brian. And I think certainly our thoughts about how wide of a margin is insurmountable were certainly thrashed after the AUDL championship weekend last year. And not to bring up bad memories for any Wisconsin-based fans tuning in, but after Seattle overcame an 8-goal deficit in the second half to beat Madison in front of 4,000 people at Breese Stevens Field, it kind of opened Pandora's box. Like, what is possible now?
It's all about adjustments. It's, can you start to key in and make the offense feel the pressure? And for Toronto, it starts with scoring here, and then after that, you saw what Mike McKenzie's bringing in terms of energy. The entire team needs to be able to do that.
Carroll shakes free of Thaw. And into the end zone for Harris. So the timeout call pays off in a big way for the Rush as they get their first goal since the 11:09 mark in this third quarter.
This is where I'm talking about in terms of defensive overplaying. It's really tough because these two marks here, one on Harris and one on Carroll, they're not playing team defense. And at some point, you have to understand as a defender that there's one area where 1/4 of the field you can say, you're not going to go ahead and beat me here, but you have to give an advantage to the other quarter of the field. Carroll was being guarded pretty well for a couple of moves, and after that, he sprang open and then got a free throw out of it. It's better to take one side of the field away, pressure the other, get that mark on, play team defense together, take away angles.
Toronto back on defense, looking for their first break of the second half. They're going to need a bunch of them to get back in this thing. Castle and Schaffner playing catch. This DC Breeze team a year ago may have felt the burden of expectation a little bit. The leaders knew they were super talented, and obviously they lost guys from last year like Nicky Spaiva, who's now with Philadelphia, Goose Helton, Brett Matsuka. With Raleigh, Bob Liu, retired, or at least stepped away from professional ultimate for now. Tom Doy. I mean, you could mention a lot of players that this DC team is missing from last year. Nate Castine, they hope to get back, but he's currently injured, fighting his way back. Brad Scott, who's been such a good player for DC through the years. had a pair of hip surgeries after the AUDL championship weekend last year, and he's hoping that by this summer he'll be able to return to the ultimate field. But the point is, Brian, that after the expectations of a year ago, some of the veterans on this DC team feel they're in a little bit better of a headspace this year, because last year there was so much pressure to execute at the highest level. This year they're focused on things like team building, having the right mentality. They talked about mindfulness.
And that's what, 50% of the job or even more is as a head coach, is you're managing people.
Kolick, laser, end zone, caught. Chuck Cantone makes it 22-14.
You see coaches that are really good strategically, and they make the right adjustments, and they're able to go out and put together a great scheme. But the other part of that coaching style is, and that's really valuable, is the relationships you build with players and the buy-in you produce. And so that way, when you make a mistake on the field, you know how to handle it. You're not sitting there trying to overanalyze what just happened or feel the frustration. You're moving on to the next thing, or you're finding a way to make a specific adjustment. And when you create that good team environment, people are going to buy in. They're going to feel better about it. They're going to feel more involved. And that's more of an art than it is a science in some cases.
DC got off to a very great start today. They led 3-0. Had a 3-score lead after one, led by 4 at the half, and they've doubled that lead to 8 here in the third. I think Darryl Stanley has to be pretty pleased with how his first game as coach of the Breeze has transpired. Asked him yesterday if he was nervous. He said more anxious than nervous. You never really know. You're going against the perennial champs. You have a chance to beat them and start the season in first place. Yearwood with a deep shot, back to Lindquist. Yearwood looking end zone. And that's Connor Armstrong, the 2016 Ultimate Canada Male Athlete of the Year. Captained the Canadian team to a silver medal in Poland last summer.
After we get to the end zone, it's a matter of being able to move the disc backward, achieve a better angle, and from there, a long swing throw, but it's good to Armstrong. Before that, to get at that position, it was Carroll that was taking his turn as a thrower. The DC Breeze defense said, hey, we're going to see what you can do, and Carroll made him pay for it. Pretty easy toss to Yearwood.
You have to wonder how the Toronto top players are feeling right now from a wind standpoint, because the Rush, well, they certainly don't get to practice a ton outdoors in the first few months of the year in Toronto. Wodach was wide open. Kerrigan comes under and somehow scoops up what looked like a turfed flick for Wodach. Foul called against McKenzie. So Kerrigan resets the pivot foot and initiates to Monroe. Another laser to Kolick. To the end zone. Kerrigan.
I talked about some early season jitters for DC, and I thought we'd see that through the rest of the game. But at this point, they're working like a well-oiled machine, and it's guys you haven't heard of. Or guys that you have heard of, but you didn't think would play that big of a role. We just got done talking about all the players they lost. And now we have Kerrigan, we have Blake, we have Monroe, we have Castle playing with the confidence of seasoned veterans. You can't underestimate that. When you come into a season and all of a sudden your young guys are really confident about playing aggressive and taking these shots, it means as a coaching staff you did a really good job of setting up how your offense is going to run. What decisions do you want to make? What's the criteria for good decision making? And then on top of that, we talked about the team building that's been done. Shooter Hasty trying to lay out on the sideline, maybe get his team motivated, prevent the pull from going even further.
McKnight will initiate from the sidelines, marked by the tall, lanky, 6'5" Minor. Yearwood around to Kelly. It's been interesting, Brian, how at times today, DC has been really lax about getting quick marks on handlers, almost allowing those guys to stay wide open and creating more of double teams downfield and clogging up space downfield.
One of the reasons I think for that is just Toronto does a great job when you're tight against them at hitting the break side.
Tough catch there by Armstrong, and it appears an unsportsmanlike foul called for the over-aggressive bid by David Bloodgame. Referee put both of his hands on his head to make that signal.
Certainly a lot of physical contact there. Glad to see both players okay.
Yeah, I'm certainly of the belief that it's better to call anything that's close, especially early, rather than let something that's marginal slip, and then the next time the other team does something that's a little bit worse than marginal, and you have that conflict of, well, do I call that? If you call it early, it kind of nips it in the bud. Lindquist can't get there. DC a chance to add to its lead. Folks around the AUDL may not be surprised that DC's probably going to win this game. I don't think anyone thought they'd win by double figures, but that's what we're on pace for right now. McDonald switches fields. Well done. John Walden with his first goal, or his first assist. He wasn't in, but he picks up the dime. DC by 9. And now they're waving off the goal. So it's still an 8-score game. And perhaps saying that Walden did not set the pivot foot in the right spot. It's a receiver travel, and they'll move him back 10. So a chance for Toronto to play some red zone defense and try to turn the tides of momentum. It's McDonald. Marked by Carroll. Can't stop that. Another catch for Chuck Cantone, the former member of the Montreal Royale. That's the franchise that has had more success than anybody against Toronto. Montreal's beaten the Rush 3 times, a couple times with Cantone on that roster, but Chuck now back in his roots, grew up in Virginia, and has been an influential defensive player leading to breaks for the Breeze.
Cantone, the kryptonite of the Rush. This game would make it 5 losses all time for Toronto in the Eastern Conference. 3 of them to the Royale, and now, should this game keep going the way it's going, 2 to DC. The one thing that's just remarkable again and again is the depth of DC is getting the job done. And they've been doing it by abusing the marks of Toronto, and so their downfield defense doesn't know which way to guard. They're letting just open side goals. The defense is not able to stop kind of the fundamental defensive tactics you learn as a young player, which is to stop the 4 side, stop the open side. But because the Breeze are just able to threaten the break side so well and demolish those marks, as a downfield defender, you're left wondering which way to guard. You can't be over-aggressive to the 4 side because it gives easy goals to the break side. I think one of the questions here, Evan, that's going to come back in the coach's mind is, what do we do? Do we use this as a chance for development?
Well, there's a nice rising up grab from Mike McKenzie. You could create a pretty good Mike McKenzie highlight reel from his first weekend in the AUDL. Made a bunch of plays yesterday up in New York, and he has been one of the real sparks of energy. But for Toronto, they've been too few and far between overall.
I think you have to give McKenzie a ton of credit. especially today. He's been a young guy fighting through all of the frustration and all of kind of, you can just see the Toronto players lagging a little bit here. They're not playing with the intensity. They're not playing with the confidence that comes from when all of these mistakes start to get in your head. But Mackenzie's playing through that. He's playing with the energy necessary to get Toronto back into this game. And that's what's important here is you need to find a way to do the little things right. And the little things being have your sideline get up and start investing in their teammates. And whether that be from just being positive, but finding those nuggets of good plays, which Mike McKenzie's done a lot of them today.
DC back on offense. Haven't played a ton of offense. More been the D-line doing work. Looking for Castle. That was brilliant. How about that shot from Matt Kerrigan?
It's just too easy. It really is at this point, and I don't know if we're just seeing a Toronto team that is tired from that back-to-back, but the last 2 goals given up have been just to the force side and have just been basic traditional offense.
.30 seconds remaining in the quarter.
Right now it looks like Jonathan Martin's leading a huddle on the sideline for the Rush. Trying to figure out what to do, and I don't think this is a coach time to solve the problem because a lot of this is energy. A lot of this is just playing basic ultimate fundamentals. Toronto needs something to rally behind.
Harris out there with McKnight, Yearwood, Carroll, Armstrong, Massick, Kelly, and Lindquist. And that's Harris on the brink of the end zone. Final seconds. Yearwood has to go to the end zone, and that's not going to work. A microcosm of this particular Sunday for the Toronto Rush. The body language says a lot. 25-16, DC leads Toronto after 3. An attentive crowd here in DC enjoying the third quarter, fourth quarter intermission on the field. They just had a throw, which if it was successful would have had netted the thrower $5,000, which makes me wonder why I wasn't picked for that, because I could have got it a little bit closer than the gentleman did. But he got a T-shirt for hitting one from 5 yards out. He couldn't hit the one 50 yards away.
Yeah, Evan, I think me and you are going to have to stick around after this game and try our luck with that.
We'll see. I guess easier to say than do up here in the booth. Well, the DC Breeze have dominated the first 3 quarters today, unlike they have ever dominated the Toronto Rush before. And this is a group in the white jerseys with a lot of pride.
This would be the worst regular season loss of Toronto's entire history of an organization. Should it keep going the way it's going.
This is their 60th regular season game in franchise history. The Rush have gone 55-4 3 losses to Montreal, 1 each of the past 3 years, and the 1 loss to the DC Breeze last year. It's funny, Brian, these 2 teams, DC and Toronto, played 4 times last year, 3 times in the regular season plus the postseason. Toronto won 3 out of 4 and obviously won when it counted. DC scored 1 more point in the season series than Toronto did because of DC's 4-goal win in their win on this field last spring. And DC will go to Toronto on May 13th. The Rush have to come back here again in the regular season. The Rush will be here on June 11th. Well, the DC Breeze certainly looking good. The Raleigh Flyers, not so much. They were down double digits today in Dallas. The first game of the first ever AUDL Cross Coast Challenge is less than 2 weeks away. A week from next Saturday, 13 days from now in Raleigh, these DC Breeze will go against the Flyers. And that disc hung up too long in the air. Eric Miner was there for the D. And that's going to be really something special, Brian, to see the interdivisional play in the regular season for the first time.
We can start really to answer all of those questions that we wonder and that we just can debate on the in your Tuesday Toss articles of who the best teams are. We'll get a little bit of definitive proof.
That floats around Yearwood and finds Miner just shy of the goal line. Crossfield Scuba juggled and caught by Bartenstein, and then over the top. The DC Breeze in front by 10 goals.
This is a tough place to be as a coach. You're trying to do your best to keep the team upbeat and trying to get as much out of this game as possible, but it's just so tough when you can see the evidence of frustration on players' faces. Some famous coaches, Scotty Bowman in the NHL, decided he was really tough on players in a very close game, in a 1-score game, but as the score got wider and wider and they were down by more and more, he would step back, and you've seen other coaches really try to light a fire under their players, really try to get into them in other cases. Here today, we see a lot of talking on the sideline. The coaches look like they have an even keel. I think the best place you can be is just trying to work on specific things. Find the players that are still mentally in it. Keep working on them to get better.
Well, Shooter Hasty, the head coach of Toronto, said no one has worked harder this offseason than Jarrett Marin. He initiates play to a young man, Connor Armstrong. And there's Mike McKenzie, Armstrong-McKenzie teammates in the Canadian Juniors team. You know, the former head coach of the Toronto Rush, Evan Phillips, has been really influential and involved in helping to develop a lot of these young youth players in the Toronto scene. He stepped away from the Rush a couple years ago, before last season, to focus on that youth development. And it is the pro team that might see the fruits of his labor, even if he's not the head coach of the team anymore.
There was a really great article talking about how it takes a village in a lot of cases, and it takes a lot of youth, it takes a lot of college experience and finding ways to get good, talented coaches at all levels. Toronto and Canada in general is a country that does it right.
One athletic bid from David Bloodgood, another from Rowan McDonald. Both came up just a little short as Marin floats it cross field. And there is Bloodgood. He gets the D on the loft. And you see the difference in energy right here between DC after a turn in Toronto. Not really wanting to defend again. They're looking for Wodach, shooting it into the double team. There was contact. Wodach was sandwiched. And the referees will blow the whistle, and it looks like talk about it. Wodach thinks he was hit.
Well, the thing that's tough about this is Armitage did initiate contact. But he did have position over Wodach. And in some cases, I'm sure some people would like to see it play on, but By the definition of the rules, initiating contact here, that should be a foul. It's a tough break because if Armitage just kind of holds his ground and doesn't initiate contact there, it's going to be a turnover going the other way.
Rowan McDonald continues his big day. Another goal for number 28. It was 16-12 at the half. And obviously in this second half, it has been all DC, 11-4 since halftime right now. Sash and Reyna pleading his case with our officiating crew. So we have to talk about this in the big picture. Has there been a changing of the guard in this division? Does today indicate that? Or is it one game in DC and we got to see what happens in Toronto on May 13th?
I think it's one game right now. I think it's tough to say that the success that the DC youth has had today is going to absolutely carry over. It's one game to a start of the season. That being said, it's going DC's way. They're doing it really well with great fundamental looks in a lot of cases. You don't go up by 11 here without being good, without having that talent, and without having a good game plan. Toronto's got a lot of talent. They're going to figure out a way to adjust.
McKnight looking for Massac Kelly. Johnson, too fast and too tall. McKnight will rethink that throw the next time around against Delrico Johnson.
I don't know if they'll rethink the throw, but I know Delrico Johnson is an incredible athlete, but I would have expected Massac Kelly here to give a little bit better of a cut going downfield. Usually you're going to love that matchup. But we talked about Johnson adding just that little X factor to the defense. He's going to be able to generate some blocks throughout the game that other players wouldn't.
That disc was tipped. Johnson almost made the play of the day. I'll mention a few of the guys that Toronto's missing today, like Mark Lloyd, Remy Ojo, Gord Harrison. They're also without Ben Burrell, their big pickup from Vancouver, who's on his way to Toronto right now. And, you know, one name that the Rush are going to be without all season, who was really good last year, Brian, a young man by the name of Nathan Hurst, who is currently working in Belgium. And he might be back in Toronto at some point future seasons, but, I mean, he was an engine to their O-line last year at times that they've missed today.
Hurst is really good. He's the type of player that's so hard to guard because he's fast and he's agile. So you put it big on him and he's going to be able to out-squirrel you in the handler space. You put a small on him and he's going to be able to burn you deep.
I love that word, out-squirrel. Lindquist was pretty squirrely in his younger days, still has some squirreliness to him.
And that's what's tough there with Lindquist is he's a taller player at 5'11"-ish. He's got good high-release throws, and he's going to find ways to get it done.
Just shy of the goal line, Harris makes it look easy to Armstrong. Pretty long point. That one took about 2 minutes and 17 seconds or so before Harris picked up the assist in Toronto with its first goal of the fourth quarter.
You see the difference in the way that Toronto is scoring, and everything is contested. The DC Breeze are doing a great job playing team defense. Even though Toronto is able to move the ball here in this case, that's the type of win. Like you can't always get a turnover. You're trying to as a defense, but as a coaching staff, you're trying to get your players to get pumped up after plays like that where it's a contested pass, where you had some opportunities to score as well. And DC's doing it with their depth. When's the last time we saw Kolick on the field?
Well, they don't need him right now. They are letting the younger guys do the work. Kolick is back out there for this 0 point with Kerrigan, Wodach, Monroe, Blake, Castle, and Schaffner.
Looked like a little bit of zone to start things off and now transitioned out of it.
Yeah, I think Markham Schaffner took the one deep shot earlier that didn't turn out to be a great throw. Wodach came back for it. It's been the young guys launching long. That throw was not too far for Tyler Monroe. Another dime from Max Castle. Castle and Monroe have been the story for the Breeze.
You're going to come into this game and your game planning as a coach, you're going to sit there, you're going to look at Kolick, you're going to look at Wodach. Then you're going to say, okay, what else do we need to do on Schaffner? And after that, I can guarantee you all of the coaches now, when they go to face the Breeze, you're going to try to figure out what to do against Monroe and against Castle. These two guys have just making play after play, and it's really tough when you don't have, if you're Toronto, you're missing a couple of players, but you need those guys when Monroe is having this type of performance, when Castle is able to break the mark.
Well, the Raleigh Flyers can't worry about DC just yet because Raleigh has a tough game at Jacksonville next weekend. But 2 weeks from now, when DC next takes the field, they'll be in Raleigh for the first game of the Cross Coast Challenge. That's Saturday, April 22nd. Now, the Cross Coast Challenge, a 4-game showcase series, interdivisional play. Games will be available to watch. Pay-per-view, $10 for all 4 games. A really great deal as Andrew Carroll makes the play. You'll see the Toronto Rush in the Cross Coast Challenge later this year. We'll be out in Seattle for Pittsburgh and Seattle on Saturday, May 6th. And then on Saturday, June 3rd, the Dallas Roughnecks. Who knows, will they still be undefeated when they go to Madison and take on the Radicals that day? And then the Rush in the final game of the 2017 Cross Coast Challenge will host the San Francisco FlameThrowers. You know, there are a lot of those matchups when you look at it in the offseason, you're like, wow, this could be a championship game preview. This could be a championship game preview. I think Dallas and Madison is the one that most people have their finger on as two teams that, you know, looked like they were on a collision course last year until the last 16 minutes of that semifinal at Breeze-Stevens.
And you love Madison as a community. You're looking for, Madison has always been known as this kind of college town, and in general, Wisconsin as a football area.
Here we go again, looking for Monroe. He broke free of Martin, and Alan Kolick served it up on a plate.
I'm shaking my head, Evan, because what do you do as a defense? This has happened over and over and over again. And so far, Toronto has not able to put something out there that says, okay, let's at least let DC just work it up the field and have to score by taking 5 to 10 yards at a time. DC has found a way to say, no, we're going to go ahead and we're going to eat up 20-yard chunks, and then we're going to go ahead and get a wide-open deep pass to the end zone. Toronto's left searching for answers. That's about it.
Well, Toronto, I'll have a lot of time to think about it, Brian, because they don't play again for a few weeks, 20 days, in fact, before they host the Montreal Royale, the home opener for the Rush on Saturday, April 29th. And that begins a stretch of 3 games in 7 days because they'll play Montreal that Saturday and then Ottawa a week later, and then at Montreal the day after that, 3 games in 8 days when the Rush return to the field at the end of the month. Oh. Chuck Cantone with an exclamation point, and it may not be the last one of the day. Walden back to McDonald with 5 minutes remaining on the clock. McDonald lets it fly, looking Cranston's way. And it was off the hands of the secondary deep man, Brian Marshall. 5 years in a row, the Rush have opened their seasons on the road. Connor Armstrong in his first year with the team getting a taste of this road gauntlet to begin the season. Another gorgeous toss. But the Rush, year after year, have come on the road in April and gotten the job done. I remember talking to Mark Lloyd a few years ago, and the Rush were just having finished up back-to-back games on the road, which they won by 1 point. And he said something like, look, we could have lost both of these games and been 0-2, and I still would have felt really good about the team we have this year. So you do have to keep it in perspective. And that's what I'm sure Toronto will try to do after this game's over.
I think there's different coaching philosophies. And one of the things I love to study what great coaches do, and Greg Popovich is one of them for the Spurs. And after they lost in Game 7 years ago to Miami, he came back at the start of the season and they watched the game, not because they wanted to relive all the sorrow, but because his point of view was let's find the specific things that we could have done better instead of just saying, hey, we had a bad day. But sometimes saying we had a bad day and moving on from the game and just having that confidence that you can play well and that you will be able to rebound, maybe it just serves not a purpose to watch everything that happened.
Blake to Castle. Got it.
Is that like the 6th goal that we've seen that has been barely in bounds, but DC has made every single play?
At least.
That's the other thing that we talk about, you know, what does this game mean? And don't get me wrong, these are all fantastic plays and a lot of good looks, but DC's hitting on almost every single one of them. Yeah, and it's hard to maintain that success.
It's like that basketball game where you shoot 55% from 3. It was just your day. The DC Breeze off next weekend. They'll be at Raleigh in the opening game of the Cross Coast Challenge a couple Saturdays from now. Looking forward to being rejoined by Megan Tormey for that contest. And then DC will host Ottawa on April 29th and then New York on May 6th. It's important, Brian, that the Breeze coalesce quickly because they have a bunch of home games early in the season. And they'll play a lot of road games, obviously, late in the year. So it's not like they can just ease their way into the season because it's not easy to win on the road.
It isn't easy to win on the road, and now the East is getting better.
Yep.
You have a Phoenix team that's going to have the talent to win games.
Carroll catches another score for Toronto. Now let's talk about that East Division because I think there's this presumption that it is Toronto, DC, and New York in any order, and then a big gap, and then Montreal, Ottawa, and Philadelphia. And while it may end up shaking out that way, we've seen Montreal pick up several of your former Rochester Dragons, a bunch of players from Boston. They got one of the best international players from Colombia. So they're going to be a force to be reckoned with along with their great crowd. And then you talk about Philadelphia, former DC Breeze stalwart Nikki Spiva will anchor that team, but it's not just Nikki. They've got a lot of other new talent that people will learn about as the season progresses.
And I think that those are big question marks because we saw how it worked for DC last year. You bring in all of this talent, and of course they were better, but they weren't putting on a display like this, which is built on chemistry and working well as a team. And as soon as I say that, it's just the commentator's curse.
Well, the difference is 10 with just over 3 minutes to go. Until the league invents the two-point play, I'm not sure this is in doubt at this point.
But going back to Phoenix and Royale, it's what can they do? How do they generate that chemistry?
Well, you know, I asked you this morning when we were having breakfast. you see San Jose beat a team like San Francisco. Does that mean now that a team like Philadelphia could beat a team like Toronto?
Absolutely.
You think so?
Yeah, I mean, you use the word "can" there. Like, we've seen Montreal take 3 off of Toronto over the years.
Wodach, he's got the legs. If it stays in bounds, he's got it. But the disc would not comply. Yeah, you're not predicting a Philadelphia win over Toronto. You just think it's within the realm of possibility.
I think Philadelphia I think the odds are greater that Philadelphia finds a way to take 1 off of New York, Toronto, or DC this year than not.
Interesting.
Those guys too, they're going to know that they're not being predicted. They're going to look to have something to prove every single game.
Goodness gracious. Tyler Monroe adds to his impressive stat line. If you had to pick an MVP for Toronto today, I mean, can you narrow it down to one? Where do you start?
Well, if we're talking about Toronto, I mean, we're looking just at Andrew Carroll, but I think on DC's side, it's really hard to narrow down. I think Tyler Monroe has been all over the field for the offense, but there's been a lot of playmakers there. And then McDonald has really impressed me about how he's just been running the show on the defensive side.
He had a couple turns early and then came back from that to really take charge and make a bunch of good plays since.
It feels like the wind has settled down a little bit here later in the day, but early on, we were seeing some discs that just popped up and went awry.
McKnight flicks it, looking for Carroll. Not this time.
It's a little too casual. Try to catch that at his knees, and he had some room to run it out and get into a better position.
Cantone has had a very solid 2017 debut for the Breeze. I mean, really, you could say something positive about everyone who has taken the field in a blue jersey today.
It's everything going their way, and we'll see here if they can kind of put the icing on top. They've got a lot of young bucks out there looking to get the job done. Linkus with the disc after the errant throw.
Yearwood, a lot of sauce on that. Right on target, though, to Lindquist. It'll be interesting to talk to some of these Toronto players and, you know, find out what they've been thinking throughout this second half, because this has really never happened to them before in the AUDL. Such a thorough beatdown.
Well, at least not in the regular season.
No.
Toronto's a team, though, that has been mentally strong. They've been resilient.
Yes, they have.
They've been in many big games before. A lot of players that are really good on the international stage. They'll find ways to bounce back.
And Toronto will play Montreal in a few weeks. Meanwhile, DC has a couple of weeks to prepare for Raleigh. Any initial thoughts on how that matchup is going to go down? Raleigh with a bunch of former DC players like Jonathan Goose-Helton, Britt Matsuka on their roster. And, I mean, it's going to be a great, fun game.
It's going to be an awesome game. There's something I can't put a finger on, but it's those Raleigh-led teams, they're never not confident. They're always just ready for a game. And talk about a guy like Jacob Fairfax. I got to coach against him in college a couple weeks ago. He's just a monster athletically.
DC's final score of the day, you would think, comes from Jeff Wodach. It's number 32 for the Breeze. DC leads it 32-21. DC only scored 30 goals in a game once last year, and it was against the winless Philadelphia Phoenix on June 18th. Mighty impressive performance for DC.
From top to bottom, from their depth to their stars, everybody's been getting a piece of the pie here today.
On the sidelines, you got Shooter Hasty, the head coach, shaking hands with some of the Breeze players. And Yearwood slings it into the crowd, and a nice catch made by a fan in the front row. Almost as if he didn't see it until the very last second. What a grab, and what a way for this Sunday to conclude here in Washington, D.C. For just the 5th time in 60 regular season games, the Toronto Rush are beaten, and they were never beaten quite like this before with so many of their top players. The Rush fall to 1-1. They got to feel pretty good about the weekend, Brian, with a road win at New York. And the DC Breeze, it's just one win on your home field. A lot of ultimates still to be played, but the conversation is going to turn to who's the favorite in this division, and DC has made its case today.
DC certainly is the #1 team in the division for now until somebody else is able to knock them off. Great performance. Very impressed with Daryl Stanley's crew out there today. Just finding ways to destroy the marks, and Toronto could never get their footing defensively.
The DC Breeze victorious in Daryl Stanley's first game. You know, maybe it was Alex Gesquier who was the problem this whole time. They couldn't beat Toronto with Dutchie leading the team, and
a guy with 4 national championships, a couple world's title. Yeah, let's get that coach out of there, and we'll put in somebody else. So
finally, they got someone who knows what they're doing. Well, the Rush will take their long trip back home. They salute the fans, and the Breeze victorious. They'll enjoy this one and get back to work, and they'll get ready to face the Raleigh Flyers in the historic first game of the Cross Coast Challenge coming up 13 days from now. But until then, we say so long from Washington, D.C. It has been a privilege and a pleasure to be back with you today on a historic day for us as we debut on 11 Sports. For Brian Jones and our entire crew, Evan Lepler bidding you adieu from D.C. as the Breeze roll past the Rush. 32-21, D.C. takes it with ease. So long, everybody.